It is getting to be time to be back in school. One day, an angel appeared at a faculty meeting, if that could be possible. The angel appeared at a faculty meeting and told the dean that in return for her unselfish behavior, God would reward her with her choice. Her choice of infinite wealth, infinite beauty, or infinite wisdom. Without hesitation, the dean selects infinite wisdom. Done, says the angel, and disappears in a cloud of smoke. Poof. Now all heads turned expectantly toward the dean, who sat surrounded by a faint halo of light. At length, one of her colleagues whispers in the silence, "You've just been given the gift of infinite wisdom. Please say something to us." The dean looks at them and says, "I should have taken the money." Not unlike the faculty dean in the Hebrew story this morning, God appears in a dream to the newly coronated King Solomon and offers Solomon anything he desires. And Solomon, too, picks wisdom over riches. And no doubt, on our better days, and in the midst of our frustrating daily struggles to discern the most life-giving path forward, we would like to choose wisdom too. But wisdom doesn't seem to simply appear to us in dreams. No genies seem to appear to grant us 3 wishes at the very moment that we need them. And though it's said that wisdom comes with age, as I approach age 50 this week, I find myself still waiting. But it may also be that wisdom comes to us in ways that we do not expect it to come, and so we miss it. It may be that while we're looking for the flashy lightning bolt from the sky, the Spirit of God is stirring through the intuitions of our bodies and minds. Stirring leadings that we can only hear when we take the time to be still and open to what is present. And though we're often taught, in this culture at least, to take the bull by the horns and determine our own destiny, there are times when stepping back and simply letting go is the slow and unexpected path toward wisdom. When Abby was something like 2, if you can believe it, we were playing in the side yard of our home under a big magnolia. Abby was having fun collecting the magnolia pods that had fallen off the tree and onto the ground. She was making a pile of them, and all was well. But then she became intrigued with the small red berries that were on the pods, and she began to collect those in her hand. When I realized what she was doing, she was a first and only child, and I was an anxious parent, so I became concerned that she might decide to eat them, since she was still at that 2-ish stage of putting things that she found in her mouth. But when I asked if she'd share the berries with me, she simply said, "No." Another 2-year-old trait. And when I tried to gently scoop them out of her hand, she simply squeezed down on them more tightly. The grip of a tiny 2-year-old hand is amazing. Have you ever tried to get something out? So finally, frustrated and angry, I sat down on the ground to see what would happen next. And you know what happened next. When I appeared to have lost interest in the berries, Abby did too. She dropped them on the ground as if they were yesterday's news. As I sat there amazed but grumpy that she had spurned my best efforts at parenting, it also dawned on me, as it does to every parent and teacher and lover of children, that there seems to be a paradoxical outcome when you're able to let go of the need to control. It seems to release something within us, something that I suggest to you one might even call wisdom. I think again of the Hebrew story that Dave read for us. The somewhat bizarre tale that is not often read in church, and it wasn't quite in the lectionary, but I lengthened it to hear it because it's actually an amazing story to me. The bizarre tale of two women, each claiming to be the mother of the same baby. And Solomon contrives a clever trick, a trick which I assume he never intended to carry out, I hope, but a clever trick to end the dispute, ordering the baby cut in half and divided between the two women. And when one of the women protests in tears and says, "Give the baby to her, just let my baby live," Solomon knows then that he has indeed found the rightful mother. Any real mother or father would put the life of their child above their own momentary happiness and well-being. And though this story is supposed to be about Solomon's wisdom, in letting go of her child, this mother was demonstrating her great love and her own great wisdom, I think, which surpassed Solomon's in profoundly gut-wrenching fashion. By holding on to the child, she knew she would lose him. But by letting go of her child, what she had birthed would survive and possibly one day thrive, even if without her. This mother was wise enough to see that, and she let go. If we see in this story a metaphor for life, the meaning can become even more profound for us. How often in life do we lose the very person or relationship or thing or idea that we have spent so long birthing because we hold on to it too tightly? When we're able to let it go and let it have a life of its own, how often does that person or relationship or thing or idea come back to us in some form or another with even more force and life than before? Is the ability to let go of control somehow connected to the ability to live wisely? It is natural to resist letting go of someone or something that we love very much. To do so causes pain, and we are wired to avoid pain. And avoiding pain is actually a good idea until our avoidance keeps us from facing something important. So much so that we find ourselves stuck, guarded, and unproductive in our living. Might the path of wisdom instead be connected to an ability to let pain teach us something? Something about who we are and where we are to go next. In her book, My Grandfather's Blessing, one of my favorite wisdom teachers, Dr. Naomi Brennan, reflects on such a possibility as she observes the life of an oyster.
Yeah.
An oyster is soft, tender, and vulnerable, she writes. Without the sanctuary of its shell, an oyster could not survive. But oysters must open their shells in order to breathe water. Sometimes while an oyster is breathing, a grain of sand will enter its shell and become part of the oyster's life from then on. Such grains of sand cause pain. But an oyster does not become hard and leathery in order not to feel. It continues to entrust itself to the ocean, to open and breathe in order to live. But it does respond. Slowly and patiently, the oyster wraps the grain of sand in thin, translucent layers until over time it has created something of great value in the place, the very place, where it was most vulnerable to pain. Sand is a way of life for an oyster. If you're soft and tender and must live on the sandy floor of the ocean, making pearls becomes a necessity if you are to live well. Disappointment and loss are a part of every single life. Many times we can put those things behind us and get on with the rest of our lives, but some things are too big and too deep to do this. And we'll have to leave important parts of ourselves behind if we treat them in the same way. These are the places. These are the very places where wisdom begins to grow in us. It begins with suffering. Suffering that we do not rationalize or put behind us. It starts with the realization that our loss, whatever it is, has become part of us. A part of us, and has altered our lives so profoundly that we cannot go back to the way it once was. Something in us can transform this kind of suffering into wisdom. The process of turning pain into wisdom often looks like a sorting process. First, we experience everything. Then, one by one, we let things go. The anger, the blame, the sense of injustice, and finally, even the pain itself. Until all we have left is a deeper sense of the value of life and a greater capacity to live. My friends, people are not oysters, but we do experience pain. And in the paradox of life, it so often seems that trying to ignore the pain actually makes it hurt all the more. Holding it tightly in our grip simply makes it expand into something more dangerous. But opening our hands and letting the pain go long enough to examine it gently and give it a life of its own within us, this has a way of transforming it from a grain of sand into a priceless pearl. From a source of fear and anxiety into a source of wisdom and a gift of the Spirit. We learn something about who we are and what we need in order to thrive. And this process must take the time that it takes. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be forced. It will not progress steadily. It will not progress without surprises. But friends, God can be trusted to be with us on this journey. And because God lives in us, we can trust ourselves and the wisdom that we come to know within us. For God can see that we are full of pearls, where we can feel only sand. Thanks be. Amen.